Good afternoon, everybody.
Aye.
5 o'clock. We have a quorum. I think we expect 2 more and we have 2 regrets. So we will get started at the top of the hour. The first order of business is to review and approve the minutes that Mike sent out last week. We all had a chance to look at the minutes. Are there any corrections, modifications, clarifications, etc.? I don't see any. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Raise your hand. Peggy, second. Jeff? All those in favor?
Aye.
And it's approved. The second bit of housekeeping is the bylaws revisions that I sent out for a first reading in the packet. As I've explained to the last 2 meetings, every other year, which is an odd year, we look at the bylaws. We were actually in a position to complete the revisions last year when things changed. So essentially for members who were around back then, there's nothing different. I updated the memo, but basically the changes were what had come out of the conversation that we had back in November of 2019. Just in sum, the minutes are, as you can see, very short as they should be. They really just govern how we do our business and what our membership is. We did take out a section that we'll look at more at our July meeting, which listed a whole series of duties and goals, and they were rather undifferentiated. So from that, I'm proposing and will present to the commission 2 short documents for review and approval, and hopefully posting at some point, which will include a mission statement, a vision, and what we see as objectives and or outcomes of the work that we do. And also sort of a list that we can agree on that are really our specific responsibilities and duties. Some of them are once a year, some of them are ongoing. So I hope to have that for everybody to review for the first time at the next meeting. For purposes of these bylaws, we don't need to vote on them tonight. It was really to give particularly the new members just an opportunity to get in the loop as to what we had been doing. If there are no questions about them at this point, I will say that there was a comment that we all received from Tim suggesting that we add education and public back into the first thing we call purposes, which actually did get struck from the original council language. So I'll go ahead and do that and flag it for the next go around. But hopefully in June and July meeting, we can have a vote and approve the bylaws and move forward. There may be one additional amendment, which I flagged in the memo, and that is I keep hearing that there's going to be a need for us to have something in there for electronic meetings under Virginia law going forward. So if so, I will add that in. If you see that in the next round, that should really be the only additional amendment. And then I think we can go ahead and clear the bylaws for at least 2 years. Peggy?
I just wondered in that first paragraph, we could add something about public health, value of trees, and we're doing so much research. We're learning so much research on that, and that's going to be a focus of ours. And I just wonder if you could work that in a little bit for the benefit of trees.
Sure. And again, from that purposes paragraph, we build out all the specific things we do. So that was the whole point of sort of
Right.
compressing that, but that is a good point to add. Vicki?
In addition to leaving out education, I think that that paragraph leaves out advocacy.
Yeah.
It has, advising the city government, but it doesn't say anything about advocating for trees. And I
Yeah.
wonder if that should be added.
Thank you. That's a good point. And you're raising that is a good point because when we did the bylaws, we had a committee called Data. And then we turned it into a more appropriately named Education Advocacy, but we never went back and picked up that term. So that's excellent because it ties the bylaws into a new committee structure. Any other comments about the bylaws at this point?
Brian, were those comments based on section 3 under purpose? The tree commission
So-
bylaws?
Purposes had been in there as section 3, I believe, and then there was a section 4 duties. So we took out the
Yeah.
section 4 duties and moved the purposes to the front where it seemed they should be. And then sort of wordsmith them a little. Obviously, some things got left out or were not added in. So these are all good points.
I see. Okay.
All right, so a couple more things for housekeeping before we get into the real meat of our afternoon together. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of interesting things. We have a meeting scheduled. It's on the books for July 13th because of the first week conflicting with the 4th. We've gone back and forth past years. I think some years we've met both July, August, some years we've met July, but not August, vice versa. Since I fully expect we will continue next month to be in this virtual mode, which means that it accommodates anybody who might be on vacation and is looking for a break from fun and wants to have even more fun by joining the tree commission, I propose, and Megan and I have talked about this, we'd like to go ahead with that meeting, keep that meeting on the books. For a couple of reasons. We have a business that we don't want to hang around for 2 months. And also because we, at this time last year, lost out on 4 meetings. So it would be good actually if we could. And hopefully we'll have a quorum or more. If you do have difficulty and you know for certain you won't be able to attend that meeting, let me know afterwards. If we see we can't gather a quorum, then we'll have to come up with another plan. But the goal is to meet in July and August. If we get all our work done in July and we feel we don't need to meet in August, since it's mid-month in July, we may just push forward. But at least for now, we'd like to do that July meeting. I also fully expect, based on comments from our friends in the communications department last time, that we will at some point after Labor Day be transitioning or in the process of transitioning back to in-person meetings. So, but I do expect at least for July and August that we'll continue doing this kind of a meeting. Believe it or not, we've been doing it this way for almost a year. It doesn't feel like it, but we're closing in on a year of virtual meetings.
Ryan, did you say the meeting in July is on the 13th?
13th.
Okay, that will be a conflict for me because that's planning commission meeting night. So
Okay.
I at least won't be able to make it.
Brian, you meant the 13th, didn't you, Tuesday?
13th. What did I say? 13th. Yeah. Okay, so Jody, we know won't be able to join. So we'll see if that date works. If not, we'll try to come up with a meeting in July so we can have a quorum. The other bit of housekeeping is, as of the 11th of this month, the clerk will close the applications. I have heard from a couple of members of the public who have applied and had some further questions, which I've referred back to the clerk's office. Just so you all know, we don't deal with that directly. I mean, if someone has a question about the commission itself, but about the process, that's all handled through the clerk's office. And then that comes through Mike and then to me as chair. So we will have applications to look at. It's a 10-day turnaround. The council meets on the 21st. So what I propose is, as we did for the last round, we as a group had identified what our needs are, and they're usually the same. We want broad community members. We want members that represent low-income neighborhoods. We want obviously members who have landscape architecture, arboristry background. So given that sort of tight window, and since we're looking to fill one seat, if the commission is in agreement, when we get those in, which I think the 11th is a Friday, so it's entirely possible we won't get them till the 14th, which will be about a week before the council meeting. Knowing what our needs are, and since we expect that there will be a fair number of, since there were so many applicants last time, there'll be some holdover applications, which Peggy and I have already reviewed. Not that we're saying we won't consider others, but if it's okay with the commission, what we would then do is review and then make a recommendation to council based on our needs. It's really not time to call a meeting and submit all of the applications around, since we're looking to fill one seat. Unless there are objections from the commission, then we would make it sort of an executive recommendation. If you have nominated, or if you know of somebody that you've spoken to and have reason to believe that they've applied, or if you want to check with me and you want to weigh in on a particular candidate, then by all means do so. But, I don't
You
see
see
any
the 11th?
objections. What's that?
Did you say the 11th is the deadline?
The deadline is the 11th, which is a week
Of
from this
June.
Friday. Yeah,
Yeah,
11th of June, correct.
Yeah.
And council will appoint it on the 21st, so they need our recommendation beforehand. And
Okay.
usually I think it's about 3 days beforehand, which really means we need to get them a recommendation by like the 20th, the 17th. And that's for one seat. At which point we'll be at full strength, which is great. And so you all won't have to do this again next year very often, I think, because I believe mine is the only term to expire. So you won't have to do this as often. I spoke to the Sierra Club on the 12th of May. That was they were very gracious. I had a chance to make our State of the Forest presentation, but in great detail. About a half an hour worth of questions afterwards. So that was a very good opportunity to do advocacy and outreach to an allied organization. They did raise a very good point, and I will bring this up with the rest of Codes Committee and with Tim, who's unable to join us this evening. They asked in this whole process of the comprehensive plan revision, the land use, revising the land use map, and most especially the zoning, what we were commenting on and what would be most important for them to reinforce. Essentially, they wanted to know, like, what can we say that would echo what the tree commission is saying? So because this process may likely go on for quite a while in terms of the zoning rewrite, and it may actually, the way the timeline's going, it may linger beyond my time on the commission. I'm just saying this for the record, that it would be a very good idea once we have our code packet together, that we take a list of all of the allied organizations and share it with them, because there's strength in reinforcing the recommendations. Vicky was at this meeting, the Sierra Club, and so she can echo. That's a very good recommendation, but I think we should extend that to all of the groups that we're working with, anybody we can think of going forward after we have that. So Peggy knows that, so that should be on the agenda. But that was a very good gathering. There's been some more community outreach. You will be happy to know that a member of the community seen the article on trees. The nominated trees wanted to nominate a tree on their property. So I don't know if Mike has received that application, but I did respond to that citizen and explained and let them know that if you do that, you are essentially giving council some say as to how that tree is disposed going forward. So obviously if it's on private property, but you're the property owner, you can certainly nominate the tree, but so that she understood that. I did not expect to hear back from her. I assumed she would respond to Mike and at some point and nominate a tree. That was a good outcome. So we had an article and somebody saw that and was impressed by the trees and said, I have a beautiful ash tree that I would like to nominate. One question for Mike, obviously he'll do this if they respond back to you, if she responds back to you, to make sure the tree is being treated, because if we go through this process, it would be good to know that the tree is actually being treated. But that was one bit of community outreach. The other community outreach was to call our attention to the oaks on Garrett and Second, and said, having read that and thinking about the trees there, which of course we are working on, and Jeff and Peggy have met to discuss this, but this is a community member who's once again reinforcing the idea those trees are important to preserve. Are they being looked at? I assured her that they were. She was very happy to hear that. So that's some good community outreach. And the last thing is, and then I'll let Mike introduce our guest presenter this afternoon. The last thing, and I don't collect anything, I don't work for the publisher, it's just a book recommendation. If you haven't heard of this book, you've probably heard of the author, but this new book out by Susan Simard, Finding the Mother Tree, is just really a joy to read. You probably know her either from TED Talks or somewhere else. She was interviewed about a month ago on Fresh Air and NPR, and it's just really a compelling book. I think anybody who loves trees, as we do, will want to add it to their summer reading list. So that's a book recommendation.
She was a
And if you
character.
have book
in the-
recommendations or article recommendations, you're always free to share, welcome to share them with us. Mark?
I'm just saying she was a character in the understory.
Yes, she was a character in the understory. She also featured and wrote a little sort of afterword in the book, The Secret, or what, The Hidden Life of Trees. So she has been, I think, probably back to the 70s, but the book is also a personal recollection. Anyway, fabulous book. So Mike is going to, we're pleased to have a presentation tonight. Mike is going to make an introduction. Before he does, we had a chance, especially over the holiday weekend, to look through, I hope all of us, a very lengthy document. If there is a request of the commission or something that the commission needs to make a decision on, whether it's tonight or at a future meeting, if that could be presented, it's easier for us to know sort of the context of what we're being asked. I know it's more than just a presentation, so if that can be made sort of clear at some point so that the rest of the commission understands why this presentation is coming before us. So with that, I'll turn it to Mike.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Patrick Booz with the USDA came to us with an interesting proposition to hopefully help protect some of our ash trees in Charlottesville using a biological control, releasing wasps to help control emerald ash borer. And he's here to give us sort of a brief overview and to take questions on this process. So I'll turn it over now to Patrick.
Hello, everybody. I'm a plant health safeguarding specialist with the USDA. And recently, back in January, the USDA switched over from a federal quarantine on ash log movement. That was originally put in forth to kind of stop the spread of emerald ash borer, but they kind of realized it wasn't really working. And in the kind of in the background, years before, we were doing biological controls with these parasitoid wasps, and now finally in January we just switched over to all our kind of efforts to just do the parasitoid wasp. So what it is there's 4 different species now of parasitoid wasps that are found in the native range where emerald ash borer was found in, and that's in Russia and China. And so these wasps will predate. They're stingless wasps, so they're not going to harm anybody else. That's like a big question I usually get, but anyways, so they're gonna, the one that I'm proposing to release will predate on the eggs of emerald ash borer, so it'll go on along the tree bark and it'll lay its egg in the egg of emerald ash borer, and then it'll come out the next year, and it's only a female. And then once a female lays an egg without it being fertilized, it'll only also lay female eggs, or only females will reproduce. That's about. Is there any major questions, or anyone have any? I haven't really got a presentation about this. I didn't expect that, but
I had a question just on your intro. I just wanted to hear what came before this. You said that a certain federal guideline was abandoned for quarantining or something.
Yeah.
Like, what did
Yeah.
we do up to this point?
So originally there was just a federal quarantine where they were trying to stop the spread of emerald ash borer, but then after, it originally came in 2004, and it came a long ways from Michigan, and it's as far out as Colorado in some spots. There's little satellite populations out there. And then it's just starting to get down into the Carolinas and I mean, it's all throughout Pennsylvania, New York. So they kind of realized that that federal quarantine wasn't really working and that we should switch to a biocontrol instead. And the whole idea of the biocontrol is that it's not going to eradicate the emerald ash borer, but it's going to take it to a point where it's not like killing the trees like outright. Like it'll like maybe it'll be a little hurt from it, but it's not going to kill the trees outright.
Peggy?
Patrick, I wonder if you could talk about other places and if they've had any success, and then where would you do it in Charlottesville? I mean, I guess that's what you're proposing.
Okay, so it has been, the program is still pretty early with the biocontrol, but I was reading a study that someone found that it has the best success on younger trees, like up to 8 dBH. So a lot of the trees that are already infested that are larger aren't really, it's not really the target of to be saved. They're probably gonna die anyways if they're that far gone. It's more to protect the younger trees that are gonna come up after it, that are still like from the seeds of the larger trees. And a lot of our releases around Virginia have been around DC. There was one in Cumberland State Forest. There really hasn't been too many in Virginia. I have one in Richmond. I'm based out of Richmond. Did that answer everything? What was?
Well,
Oh, Ragged Mountain. That's where I was proposing for Charlottesville.
are there 25% ash there? Well, how about unintended consequences? I mean, I know sometimes when you introduce pests or insecticides or whatever,
Yeah.
we're lauded as wonderful, and then we get all these unintended consequences.
The USDA has reported that there weren't any unintended consequences so far, but I mean, who knows? It's pretty early in the process, but so far we haven't had any other insect species or anything that it was attacking. It's pretty much a specialist. It's not like a generalist or anything. This insect, it only really predates on emerald ash borer eggs.
So just to be clear, if you were to release, you said Ragged Mountain, but if you were to release in that area,
Mm-hmm.
this would be sort of within that area, sort of a broad release. But, and I guess Mike could also answer the second part of this question, which is how many trees do we have currently that fall within that range, that DBH, but it would obviously go wherever the emerald ash borer is, but what you're saying is that if it goes to the large trees and predates on them there, it's not likely to do anything to help the tree, but at some point, if small trees begin to show up and the insect goes there, then the wasp will find its way there. I mean, is that generally how it happens, or?
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly. It's just that typically with the larger trees, the damage is already done, and it's just kind of, it's good to still have them to have like seeds that'll still be produced, you know. But yeah, they're typically too far gone. But I mean, theoretically they could also be saved, but it's typically more to save the younger trees. And what they found in where these insects were, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but in their native range, the Chinese ash is like rarely affected by any emerald ash borers. And it's just kind of like, it'll be like nothing to what we get, like with the bark kind of all falling off and like the trees just the epicormic branching and nothing like that. It's just such a small amount of damage compared to what we have, and they attribute it to these different parasitoid wasps that are attacking emerald ash borer there, where the emerald ash borer is native and it like evolved among these other pests. And, you know, it comes here with that unfair advantage of not having any predators. So
Mike, your thoughts also, and then we have a question from Vicky. I guess the second part for Mike is like, how many, in our inventory, how many trees that we have could immediately benefit or benefit short-term from this?
Sure. So for the USDA guidelines to use this parasitoid wasp, they're looking for larger tracts of the timberland that are forested that are at least 25% ash. And, you know, we need to have some healthy ash trees as well. And I think we have that sufficiently at Ragged Mountain. And I think that is, to meet the USDA's criteria for this release, is probably the most suitable. And I think that anywhere that we can slow the spread of emerald ash borer, I think is a win for us. I think it's fairly well studied that the benefits outweigh the risks of this release. But anytime you're releasing something else, you know, there's always going to be questions, and especially if it's something like a wasp. But I think the science is there.
It's a win for Charles, so it's also another data point, that sort of a win for science. So if we were to go forward, it's also something we're doing generally. Vicky?
I'm wondering if this would be completely in addition to whatever current treatment practices there are and the whole plan for dealing with the ash trees, or would this have the potential of substituting for some of the other control actions that you have to do?
I think that's I think that the big issue, I think, dealing with emerald ash borer is dealing with it all at once. And I think anywhere that we can slow the spread of emerald ash borer, I think will be a win, because in terms of annual funding and things like that. But again, like a place that meets the criteria like Ragged Mountain, where it's going to be hard to get in there to address these dying trees that are on trails and things, they're going to be lower priority. So I think anywhere we can slow that down and help as much as we can. And I think to show that we're being proactive and we're trying something, you know, innovative, I think that's a great thing.
Jeff A?
And it's as I understand it from what I think you provided, Mike, it's a USDA funded project, and then it's basically a research plot for them, and they'll continue studying. And are there any costs associated with this for the city?
Patrick, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand there are not costs associated to the city, and this is funded through USDA.
yeah, this is all USDA funded, and it's studied for 5 years after. Usually, typically, they do yellow pan trapping to see if populations are there and that they are breeding. Another thing, it's been released in 30 states, and 22 states have breeding populations. And going back on the insecticidal treatments, that's pretty much the only other viable treatment that's going on right now is the debate and systemic insecticide. And I mean, that's all good too, but then, I mean, I guess the pro you could look at this is that you're not like dumping chemicals into trees, and when you do that, that tree is kind of ecologically dead then. You know, it can't interact with certain organisms like it did before, you know.
Jeff P?
Not sure if you guys can hear me.
No, we can't hear you.
I'm currently driving. Was wondering how many, I guess, 5-year periods have there been thus far? It's kind of,
Okay, we lost Jeff. Sorry, Jeff, we lost you. We'll give you a chance when you go around the next bend. Mark R?
Yeah, it was something about how many 5-year periods has it
Yeah.
been? I heard him say, but I was curious, since Mike mentioned that Ragged Mountain has 25% ash trees, I was curious sort of how we know that. It's probably not an applicable question in the city, but it's interesting nonetheless to know where in, say, Albemarle County, we have large stands of ash trees that are potentially, at risk. Is there a database somewhere or a map that we have that can get that information, or how do we know?
It's an estimate. It's not an exact science. You can do some people
Every fourth
like,
tree.
yeah. It's I mean, some people do like point data or point quarter plots and stuff like that, but it's what we usually do is just an estimate.
It's not an aerial survey kind of thing or something.
No.
We have that mapping, like tree canopy. Okay. I'm
There
just
may
curious.
be things like that out there, but we haven't done that.
Thanks.
How far do they range? So, I mean, let's say we do this in Ragged Mountain. I mean, are these wasps are gonna make their way farther in, or what do you know about that?
That's the idea, is that you can get a breeding well, I guess it wouldn't really be breeding, but you know what I mean, like a population that sustains itself and eventually spreads. And I don't know the time frame on that, or yeah, but that's the goal.
Todd and Mike, to your knowledge, do we have, I'm just sort of thinking through, do we have any other sort of joint projects or agreements like this or similar to this? What's the mechanism? There must be something the city has to do.
Several years ago, we released a similar situation and released a predator beetle that fed exclusively on Hemlock Woolly Adelgid, and we released it at the Sugar Hollow reservoir on that property there. And that was, it was something we took to the tree commission. It was something we spoke with Shenandoah National Park, because they're our biggest neighbor to Sugar Hollow. And staff formulated a decision, and we went ahead with that release as well. And there's a similar program through the USDA, just a different insect and different pests, right? So this is similar to what we've done before.
Okay. Other questions? Peggy?
Did I read that you don't want to do it in places where humans and lots of trails are? And if that's the case, I mean, there are lots of trails at Ragged Mountain. More and more people are using it. Or did I read that incorrectly?
I think that it wants you to kind of keep away from like public parks and stuff like that, or that are like manicured areas. They want more like natural areas that are kind of left alone, things that won't be developed. That's kind of the idea. I also, when we do the releases, it helps a lot when sometimes people like to mess with the things that or like say in the future when we do yellow pan trapping, sometimes people may mess with that. But I feel like I'm pretty confident that there's enough area between trails over in Ragged Mountain that it would be all right.
That raises the issue, Mike, did the last time, what kind of announcement or notice to the public, or what do we do? There's so many people in this town who are gonna, first day, they're gonna see a wasp that they don't recognize and they're gonna swarm everybody. Do we have to, I mean, it would be a good idea if we choose to do this to have at least some kind of, not public notice, but something that says, we're doing another front of treating emerald ash borer.
Sure. I think similar like we did for Hemlock Woolly Adelgid, I think we put out a press release so there was no surprises for anybody. So I think that's the responsible thing to do here as well.
So Mike, you're bringing a recommendation to the commission, and so it's something for us to consider based on not only the information Patrick provided, but also your professional assessment. Are there any other questions or comments? Commission, anything preventing us, you think, from endorsing this plan? Mark Rylander?
Sorry, I just wanted to follow up on the recommendation to not have it near people and trails. Again, it sounded like what Patrick was saying was that it was basically thought to be more effective if there's a sort of uncompromised ecosystem of these trees, just because, you know, for the purposes of study. I mean, there isn't anything about it that where there's some concern that it might actually, you know, be a problem with people and trails. I was just trying to understand your answer, which sounded like it was just preferable not to have them near people, but why?
I think the biggest thing was that just that people wouldn't mess with it, kind of. I know these are like stingless wasps. They're not going to harm people or interact with people. I think also I think the idea was that if it's at a park, it's probably surrounded by urban environment, which wouldn't really help the spread. If, you know, it would be kind of its own little island. But, you know, Ragged Mountain is kind of connected to other woodlots that I feel like would be good enough to continue the spread.
And Patrick, this is Jeff. When we speak of the wasp and the size of the wasp, it's tiny.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's like a very small bug.
Yep. It's like
Like less than
like
a millimeter.
Kind of. Yeah, not even a housefly.
Yeah. So it's the layperson is not going to recognize it or see it, I would think.
Yeah. I mean, I would assume.
Just to put it in context, it's not a wasp that you get scared of at a picnic.
No, it's not like a yellow jacket or anything. It's about like Cheerio size, kind of.
I don't suspect there'll be a lot of concern, but there are amateur entomologists all over Charlotte. So somebody will find it, but they're not going to be afraid of it. It's not some souped up looking thing.
No, it's not like the murder hornet or anything.
So has everybody had a chance to ask what's on their mind? Mike, are you making a formal recommendation this evening for us?
Yes, I would like to recommend moving forward with releasing the parasitoid wasp to help control emerald ash borer at the Ragged Mountain natural area.
Okay. Are there any other documents that we need to look at? I mean, is there some kind of formal like proposal or document? I mean, this was very interesting, but it's sort of at length. Is there anything we need to see before we vote, or is this something you're going to handle paperwork on?
Yeah, I can handle it and give Patrick and USDA the authorization to do it. I just wanted to make sure everybody's on board.
All we need is a land use permit that just kind of says that we're allowed to be where we are.
Mhm.
Kind of CYA.
Okay. Well, is there a motion that we endorse or accept the recommendation of a city arborist on this?
I move to endorse the recommendation.
That's Mark Rylander, Jeff A. seconds. All in favor of moving forward with this? Aye.
In favor.
Another, just hands up again, just so we can record, Mike, we can record the vote. Can you see the hands that are up and the hands that are, we can't, Jeff Pacelli, that looks like a hand up.
Yeah, I'm raising, doing the phone raise hand
Okay,
as an endorsement, if you can hear me.
okay. Mike captured all of that. All right, thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Mike. You'll let us know when we can go out. We won't disturb them, but you'll let us know when we can go out for a walk and see if we can spot one.
Sure.
There's some
Mike, did
curiosity.
not agree just because I'm old fashioned and the government had said autumn olive was great and multiflora rose was great. And so I don't know. And I'm not convinced with the success. So I'm a vote no.
Okay. We record, I think Mike recorded all the vote. All right, thank you, gentlemen. We go now to committee reports. We are at our usual place on the agenda in our usual time, which is about 10 minutes. behind, but we'll catch up. First, education and advocacy. Peggy, I know that you've got a couple of things to report on, some updates for us.
Yeah. I will report on the Arbor Committee and the Education and Advocacy Committee. So we have some exciting news. A few of us, myself, Roxanne White, and my daughter, Shanna Clark, who got the contact for us with the Virginia chapter of the Nature Conservancy. Anyway, they have awarded our effort $20,000. I think we've been talking about this. And the purpose is to address environmental inequity in Charlottesville by funding projects that will add canopy trees, more green spaces, and increased appreciation of nature, particularly in low canopy areas. So we've been working, we've been talking about this, we've been working on it for a long time. And we see it a partnership with our group, the Tree Commission, the Virginia chapter of the Nature Conservancy, Parks, and the City of Promise. And we have a corporate sponsor who is also going to give money. That's Van Yeri's Tree Company. My daughter owns that. So she has been pushing this initiative. So we haven't worked out exactly, what we're going to do. We're getting some feedback now from potential people who live in the 10th and Page. But some of the activities, well, let me back up a little bit too. The Charlottesville Community Area Foundation is going to be hold the funds and accept other funds that are going to be donated. So some of the events that we see, we will partner with the Tree Stewards to do some planting. If you read Tim's email, he hasn't found people in 10th and Page that want trees yet, but he probably wasn't, I don't think he was at that whole meeting. We actually, out of 5 people, we got 1 person who wanted a tree, the meeting with the neighborhoods. But Jeremy Catlin, who owns a lot of property in 10th and Page, is going to want to have trees on many of his properties. We'll also approach Keith Woodward, who owns a lot of rental property. So we do think there'll be an opportunity to plant trees. Also, through the Tree Commission's own budget, I think there's some areas in that neighborhood we can plant trees. One in particular would be at Venable, which is not actually in the area, but all the children go to that elementary school. And one of Venable's playground is just a heat dump. One playground has lots of trees. The other one for the older kids has very few trees, and it's right next to an asphalt playground. So that's just an example. I think the Tree Commission can help. But with working with parks, Lucy Hartlett has said she's interested in working with us. We plan to have an event. It would probably be like at Venable, because we want to involve, we think we can reach, if we can reach the children, just like we did on Arbor Day at Walker, the message that trees and nature are important, that message is going to go home. So we think it's important to reach the kids. We'd like to fund some activities with teachers to get them to, the children to appreciate trees and nature and getting the benefits of getting outside. And we perhaps might even enhance one public space within the next couple of years. So those are some sort of immediate goals or activities we'd like to do. Brian and I are going to be working with a group to flush out our actual purpose and goals, and then we'll get back with you and the Arbor Committee and the Education and Advocacy Committee. We're going to do that just because Brian and 2 people can work together, and we can meet with people like the City of Promise and get some feedback. So we're not trying to leave you out, but we want to develop a draft and then get back to you. But anyway, we're really excited about it. So, because we've been working on it, as you know, I've been talking about it for a number of months now. So, and then on the other front, Jeff Ayton has really kindly said he will take the initiative. We want to nominate more trees for protection. and particularly the trees, the oaks around Garrett Square. I think it's the pin oaks on Garrett Street and the white oaks on 2nd Street. There are about 26 trees there. And we know that there is going to be development there, but we think it's worth the chance, at least let the Planning Commission know and City Council know how important these trees are, to try to save as many as we can. But because there's so many trees, you may not have known when we nominated the 6 trees just recently, the package that went to City Council was 40 pages long. That's 6 trees. Now we got 26 trees. So Jeff is working on some ideas of how to we can more efficiently report to City Council, because in our ordinance, it's pretty loose, the language of what it says, how we need to report. But you can imagine how big a package could be with 26 trees. So we're going to meet with Mike and Brian and the Arbor Committee, and Jeff's going to present some ideas on how we can do this more efficiently, and hopefully get it ready for our July meeting. So Jeff is going to contact Mike after this meeting, see if we can set up a meeting to do that. So those are the 2 main things I wanted to report, and we'll get back to you on both of those, hopefully in July. Any questions?
Well, I want to start by thanking Peggy and Roxanne and Peggy's daughter and others for the efforts. This is sort of the first step in what we hope will be an ongoing public-private partnership. The important thing about having CACF manage is that at some point, hopefully in the not too distant future, we could have a public-private board, as they do for the scholarship fund, that would, including tree commission members, but tree stewards and others, so that we'd have sort of a broader based community effort working together to fill a need that the tree commission and the city alone cannot fill, at least at present. So it's a start in the best sense. It's not a one-off. It's actually the beginning of a longer term project, and a lot of the important legwork and groundwork has been done over the months. So thank you, Peggy and the group. Are there any questions about what Peggy's reported on, either about this or the trees at Garrett? So the trees at Garrett, I will say again that they are on the public mind, not just ours. That's good. The other thing I will say is that, for better or for worse, I realized making the presentation to the Sierra Club last month that there are, just on Garrett, there are examples of 3 different issues or problems. Most of them go back to our code and to development. We know of the trees that were cut down because they're in front of the new Apex building development because there was no way they could stay. We know of the trees that were not supposed to all come down at the other new office building, but that eventually, for a number of reasons, we ended up with a tree lawn and a single tree. I don't know what the species is, but I don't believe it's a particularly large canopy. And then right across the street, we have a different situation, which, as you know from the annual report, and Paul Jose has like to point out, even if you can save on paper, save a number of those trees, the construction is likely to impact them in a way that eventually they will fail. So if you take that one street, we actually have sort of 3 examples, 3 case studies of the ways in which the code as it currently is really does not protect our street trees in the way that it should. It's in a sense, it's sort of a sad laboratory. And our hope is that we can at least stanch some of that going forward, that there will be some trees left on Garrett some years from now, and hopefully on 2nd as well. So this is important. The Tree Commission once again understands the need for development. We understand the need for renewing and expanding and improving public housing. We're just here to advocate for a balance, to make sure that we're looking out for the urban forest that protects us all. So both very important efforts, and thank you all for your work on them. There are no questions. We're going to go to codes, and since you all received a little report from Tim, so you know where the process stands, I have I had already had a few things that Peggy and I had discussed, wanted to talk about in terms of codes and practices. So first of all, there is, as Jody has shared with us and others of you may have already known, but there is an extension on the comment period through to June 13th, so about 12 days from now. One of the questions that came up is, obviously we're not in a place where we're going to comment on codes. One of the questions that came up last week was, had we, and this is for some of the old timers here, had we submitted, and Mark Rylander may recall, and maybe Mike and perhaps Jody, had we submitted at any point along the way, last year or whenever this effort began, written comments on the actual changes proposed to the comprehensive plan? To your knowledge, anybody, have we done that? Did we do that? Jody's nodding yes. Okay. You're on mute.
Yes. It's been so doggone long ago that everyone's forgotten. Paul Josie, I believe, led the effort when the first draft of the chapters was put out for public comment. And that was maybe a year ago.
So my understanding is that this June 13th extended deadline is still an opportunity to say something about the comprehensive plan as well, not just the land use portion.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And in particular, and the thing that we need to look at are the chapters, the particular chapters that have to do with trees, and that's, you know, either utilities or development in neighborhoods and setbacks, those kinds of issues.
Okay. I don't have a copy of those comments in my folder. I have everything else, but I don't have that. So if you, I can ask Paul, but if Jody, if you have them at your fingertips, or I'll check with Paul. I think it would be.
Try. I will
Okay.
go back. I've been having some trouble in my transition between university provided computer system to my own personal computer system. And I have lost a lot of things.
Okay.
But I will go back. I did make a hard disk copy of a lot of my emails anticipating some issues. So let me go back and see if I can find them.
Okay, and I'll ask Paul, since he probably would have been the one to submit them to you.
Yes, I'll certainly remember.
Which does remind me, I wanted to comment on how relaxed you looked at this month's meeting. So from your retirement,
Oh,
you're looking very relaxed.
I feel relaxed.
So, because it's been a while, it would be good to just see what we said and see if there's anything else we want to add. Peggy did look through today and realized that there was some language in there that was still the vague language about a sort of combined malt study, which doesn't tease out the tree part. And I think it's important that we sort of make sure we update that language so that it reflects what we propose to do. We'll talk a little bit more about the malt tree study in a minute, but.
And I suspect, or I'm sure that since the last time Paul provided some comments, the whole issue of health and equity of trees, that has become more of an issue and become more known since that time. So yeah. I would look to emphasize those items.
So I would ask Jeff P, and I followed up earlier today with Tim and I and Mark Rylander, to the extent he has a little bit of time, since he's a minister without portfolio, if he has wants to have some input, that we would address this. There might not be time to get all these comments circulated to the entire commission, but since it's gone through the commission once before, I think it's a matter of making sure that we've updated and it reflects current things as we've discussed here. And because the turnaround is, by the time we get the comments and talk about it, the turnaround is pretty quick. But I think it's worth doing that. So that's one part. The second part is, and Tim and I have exchanged emails about this. So there's the proposed land use map, which we are all familiar with now because it's out there and it's the source of a lot of conversation. I don't think specifically there's anything there for the tree commission to comment on. I mean, I suppose generally higher density, which we don't know where that's going to end up in the final map, but you know, depending on where it ends up, higher density could mean the potential of affecting tree canopy, but that's sort of like throwing darts against, Jello. We don't know where that's going to be. I think what's important right now is for us to make sure that our comments on the comprehensive plan are comprehensive and current. So we'll focus on that. And obviously the big work is going to be on zoning going forward. But, unless there's any thought that we really have to have a statement, which I would prefer not to have an official statement of the tree commission on land use, beyond the fact that we need to make sure we're not taking down trees to increase density too much. But Peggy, you had your hand.
Jody, there is a little bit, I just skimmed it. It's as long as the ash tree report from the fellow who just was there, just about. But they do mention heat islands. There's sort of passing reference to that.
What? I'm sorry.
They do mention heat islands.
Oh, heat islands. Okay.
Islands and health a little bit. It probably could be bumped up. But one
Good.
thing, as I look through the comprehensive plan, I mean, I'm interested obviously in trees, but access to green space, nature, trails, and that sort of thing. There's a lot of talk about more parks, more green space, access to nature, trees. But then you look at the land use map, and as hard as they are looking for new housing, and I know it's a macro kind of look, but I don't think they identified any new green space.
No.
And I sort of wondered, and Todd's on the, I don't know if he's listening, but it sort of surprised me that there wasn't sort of some, nod to new green space. They talk about it, but there's nothing in the land use plan, as far as I could see. And I don't know if the Parks Advisory Board has looked into that.
I'm sure they have, but that is just not the emphasis of the community right now, and and all the comments that I'm getting. The devil will be in the details, which is going to come during the code revisions, and that's where we will need to be especially vigilant in making sure that open areas are included, setbacks are considered, that the coverage of a lot is considered so that we can continue to have green areas. Those are going to be the details that are going to be especially important to us. They need to be set for every zoning district. I forgot the other thing I was going to say. I'm sorry. Nope, it's gone.
Okay. It'll probably come back. We'll give you a break for a minute. Mark
Next year.
R.
Next year.
Mark R.
2 points of it. Briefly on the earlier topic of the comprehensive plan, I know that we made extensive comments on the first round and that the basic comprehensive plan was not altered dramatically. So we should at least sort of feel that we had made a pass in the previous round. But relative to land use, comment number 2, I've been spending a lot of time on this and I'll share my thoughts. I've been working on it over the weekend, trying to figure out how to respond. And I think there's something in the process that is going to be working against large canopy trees in the public right of way. And that is the fact that, you have this aspirational comprehensive plan language about let's have more trees. Then you have the map of, colored squares that suggest something that isn't codified. And then suddenly you codify it based on that map, which becomes binding. And I don't know, Jody, if the map eventually gets revised, but what I'm worried about is that the map is going to set in motion a lot of professional assumptions about what density means and what setbacks mean. So if East High Street is, allowed to be 8 stories tall, it's very unlikely that we'll continue to have 15-foot setbacks from the right of way. So what we might do, we might consider some type of simple statement that says that the land use plan should allow that high density areas should allow large canopy trees in the public right of way, period. You
Yeah.
know, and then when somebody comes in the code portion and says, let's have 0 setbacks, which only allows, you know, a dogwood, you say, well, wait a second. You know, somehow that happens. But if I were to start this over, I would not design the process in this way anymore. I know too much about how architects work. And it's like, we're locking stuff in and we don't know what it is. We have vague language and then suddenly we're writing the code. And how did that happen?
You're absolutely right, Mark. As far as I understand the process, the comprehensive plan and along with the future land use map, they're going to be approved first by council, planning commission, then council, before they get into the zoning rewrite. So they're going to be hardwired by that time. And the issue of setbacks, I mean, we lost that issue when in the West Main West planning, when that was the zoning was changed on Main Street to 2 different districts that are separated at the bridge and the railroad tracks. Instead of north and south, they were separated east and west. And we pushed very hard for 15-foot setbacks. And I think we ended up with, we got a compromise of 10. You know, it was fighting against the rest of them that didn't want any. You know, there's a contingent on planning commissioners that want to see little Igos all up and down Main Street. So it's contentious.
So my point, and I like what Mark is recommending, my point initially was that we weren't in a position and shouldn't be in a position to comment specifically on the recommendations of land use. But I like the idea of being on record with a general comment. Would we be able then, keeping it to a page, a paragraph, to suggest potential adverse outcomes from this that might affect trees? I think that would sort of strengthen sort of a general statement. And then maybe just a few bullet points or something. So it's you know, it's there. I mean, I know that specialists could understand that, but it might be good just to have that in there unless people think we should just have a 1 sentence.
I would recommend it be put into the comprehensive plan chapter, the most appropriate chapter for that. Just like I would recommend that just instead of leaving it vague, like neighborhoods that don't have the right percentage or to have the appropriate percentage of trees should have them or improve their neighborhoods. Specifically spell out 10th and Page, Star Hill. You know, let's say which neighborhoods are unhealthy because of the lack of trees, and that they need to have more tree plantings.
Right. If we go, I just to sort of restate that, because I think that's exactly right, that we have to we've been working at getting rid of the aspirational language without getting rid of the aspirations. We want to make the comprehensive plan kind of as binding and as specific and actionable as possible. So
Right.
anything that related to trees, we can turn into a specific action item like that would be a good, would be an improvement.
And that's a measurable outcome by the time the next comprehensive plan is done.
So to be clear, when they're taking comment by the 13th, there's just a single set of comments that cover both the comp plan and the land use map. So we're really just saying that we only need to comment in this way for the comp plan. There's no separate document that would say, and this is our comment on the land use map, proposed land use map. We're really commenting on the comp plan.
To Mark's point, if you can put into the chapter the warnings and issues involved with a greater density in the communities, I would recommend getting that kind of caution into the chapters.
Mark, I know we were communicating today about our future dreams working on Maplewood, but do you have time if the two of us put our heads together in the next week? It sounds like this is not a complete review of our comp plan comments. We can stand by most of what's in there, but do you have a chance to bounce this around with me?
Yeah, I've been working on trying to take my usual like 3 pages and turn it into a paragraph. So
Okay.
I'm getting close.
So
Yeah, but it
Because what
takes
it-
you those 3 pages first.
It does. It certainly does.
because whatever comments we submit, this is a case where we do want to circulate them to the commission because they're coming from the commission. So it's important that the commission see them, which means Mark and I at 7:30 tonight need to start working on this. So no dinner for you, Mark. And so we can send them out. If we do the 13th, we want to be able to send them out in time for you to read. We'll figure out a way to send them out so you don't have to read through an enormous document. We'll send out the changes we've made that are most pertinent to our conversation tonight. Since the commission already approved all the other changes, I don't think we need to go back over all of that, but, and so Mark, you understand this a little bit better than I do. So you and I will work on this.
Okay.
With a goal, if the comments are due the 13th, a good goal, if we could, give you all like the beginning of next week or a week from today, hopefully to look at them a week from today, and then we can submit them in time. Any other comments or questions about that? I think it was really good to talk about it because we don't want to leave anything on the table that we can comment on. Jody, did you remember your second point?
I will, no.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I've already said it. I did remember it. That was the issue about stating the neighborhoods that need more tree planting. I will let you all know that I'm getting 15, 20 community comments a day on the comp plan. And most recently, most of the comments have been that this is being rushed and asking for more time. So I can't swear that that's going to happen, but a lot of those kind of comments. Don't be surprised if you don't have dinner tonight, Mark, and then you find out tomorrow that it wasn't necessary. You could have eaten.
Okay. Okay, dinner tonight. We'll start at breakfast tomorrow.
It's after pickleball.
Okay.
May I ask a question? Jody, let's see. Now I'm going to forget the 2 seniors here. Well, maybe they're more seniors than just you and me. When we do these comments, should we send them to Planning Commission too? You said, I mean, besides the consultants, you said you're getting comments. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm getting lots of comments. I think that the consultants first, and if you'd like to copy the Planning Commission, yes, that'd be fine. But I'd be surprised if the planning commissioners are reading all these. In fact, I'm not reading them as they come in. I've got myself a big pile of a big folder to go through all of these comments before my next meeting.
It's a good time you have. It's a good thing you have all this time in your hands.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Peggy?
being retired, you wonder at the end of the day, what in the world did I do all day?
I know.
There's the environmental chapter, which of course has a lot about trees, but I guess we might want to put some of these comments. There's the environmental chapter, which is a lot about trees. And I think it's goal 6 is trees, but I guess we probably want to also comment in the sort of land use, the development section too, right?
It sounds like that's where we really need to focus.
Just remind people that with greater density comes a greater concern for making sure we have open areas to allow canopy trees.
Yeah. All right, all great points. Thank you. If anybody has additional thoughts, you can reach out to me and I will assign them to Mark. Mark's like, doesn't my term end next year? I thought my term was. All right, so we haven't cheated you too badly, Mike, but you have plenty of time to go ahead with all of the items. I know there's going to be some conversation about them. So I will turn it over to Mike now for the arborist report.
Okay, so the first thing we have in the arborist report is the Emerald Ash Borer Action Plan, which I sent out after some comments from the committee, I believe. Made some changes. There's some stronger language in there some more urgency, and it was well written. But I understand there's probably some questions or comments regarding. I know Peggy had some questions about keeping the funding, the 3 different funding scenarios, and keeping them in the plan. So has everyone had a chance to see the one at least that went out with the tree commission agenda packet?
Well, Mike, I think, well, Jean and I got together and reviewed it. Our concern, there's a question, is this a report sort of what you're going to do, or is this a report that will eventually get to Planning Commission and City Council when we talk about what the funding needs are? And we were concerned that you were undermining your rationale about saying what it's going to cost for 5 years, and then laying out a scenario, what you'd do if you didn't get any money, or what you'd do if you got 50,000. And our concern was we ought to just ask for the money because, they're going to do whatever they want. But if you sort of backtrack and say, well, I can do this with nothing, I think Planning Commission and City Council are going to say, well, good, you get nothing. That we needed a strong statement about what the needs are. And we needed to since you made this great argument about what the costs are going to be, then all of a sudden you back up. It undermines your argument.
Okay. Yeah, I think I don't think it necessarily undermines the argument. I think there's still a demand, there's still a need for this money. I think it would be irresponsible to not have different funding scenarios. If I think that the next question is, when this is an action plan for our department, and when someone says, how is the city of Charlottesville dealing with their emerald ash borer problem that's really coming home now? And then we can say, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're doing it. And I think whenever we ask for funding, and the question always comes, well, what could you do if we gave you what you're asking for, or what if we gave you less? What could you do with this scenario? That's always the first question that comes from, city manager's office, finance, city council is, well, what about this? What are we getting with this? So I think I understand what you're saying, that you feel it kind of undermines the asking for what we need, but I think as part of an action plan, I feel like we kind of need to have it.
Well, I would think you might, if you're going to do that, then if you say, well, if we get nothing, give us nothing, maybe we better say this is not going to be good because it could decimate our maintenance budget.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
You need to make an argument for, first make an argument what your needs are, and then make sure you let them know if you get less, there are going to be bad consequences.
Right.
So this is Todd. So I asked him to write that, as an action plan to basically for Chip. If Chip came to me and said, Todd, how are you handling, this horrible situation? That was the intent. This is what we're doing with the money we have. Here's, if we had more money, here's how the approach we would take. And that the ask really isn't part of this. Now, if there is needed, I agree with you all, 100%. We do need to figure out a way to ask. I don't think it's through, basically a procedural type of plan that was, that we've asked to write. If there's something else that we need to create, as terms of soliciting the needed fund, the only thing I would probably argue a little bit is, writing something, if we don't have them, here's what's going to happen. I would give the audience a little more credit to say they know what's going to happen. These trees are going to die. They're going to be falling on top of people or houses or blah, blah, blah. And we are going to have to take care of them. So I'm all ears in terms of you all have a different, or if you think this is a mechanism to try to get the needed money each year. I was kind of more looking at the realistic of, okay, how am I going to handle this? How's Mike spend his day taking care of this?
So when we do go before council, planning commission and council in the next budget round, obviously we're going to be submitting something like we did last time for emerald ash borer, which is going to be funding, and somewhere in there's a narrative. This seems like a freestanding thing. There's sort of a plan. You could pull it out. You could show it to somebody in city government. Heck, you could show it to an interested citizen and say, this is sort of our plan. Peggy and I just want to make sure that we're starting with our strongest ask. And if this is something that is, we draw language from it, but we add narrative, Mike, you add narrative on the charts for the CIP and explains. I mean, to me, that's where you want to make your strong pitch for the $105,000 a year and not spend a lot of time talking about, but we can still do a few trees if you don't give us money. I mean, to me, those seem like two separate documents. The only thing I would say about the plan as it is here right now is, and I know Peggy proposed an alternative, which was just to list under removal procedure for dead and dying trees, which the rest of the commission doesn't have, but she recommended just ranking trees by high, medium, and low priority, and there were no dollar values. But Mike's plan, the one that you're all looking at, this draft lists a range of things that could be done. I would recommend in that list, just inverting it to start with your top ask with 100. In other words, start what you can do with the most money and end up at the bottom with what, and we can word that so that it directs people to say, you don't want to choose option 3 on this list. Because option 3 on this list gets us the least removal and the least treatment. So we should, I mean, just as a matter of like a salesman, we should start with the addition, the funding budget we're asking for will allow us to do this. If we can't get that money, we're going to do less. This is what less looks like, and sort of work backwards on this document. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, does that answer some of your concerns, Peggy? The fact that this is not the last word on the CIP project, but also recognizing that Todd and Mike want something that they can sort of give as a cheat sheet to people who are interested in de-government, saying this is what it looks like if we don't get any money.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we don't get any money, I think we may need to make a strong statement that really literally it cuts their maintenance budget in half.
Yeah.
So how are we going to address storm damage? How are we going to address, pests and insects, other pests and insects? How are we going to address, all kind of, Mike spends all this money, every year, over $200,000 just maintaining our trees and trying to preserve our best trees. Well, if we don't get any money, it's going to cut that in half. I think we need to make that strong statement.
Well, it's in there in the paragraph. I mean, we can pull it out again and we can highlight, but it's in the paragraph on budget, so we can reference it again.
Right. I think you're right, Brian. Start with what we want and how that'll help us. And the last one, if we don't get any money, these are the bad consequences.
And I think it's okay in that language we can strengthen it a little to say, sort of, this would be a dire situation if we didn't have funding.
Well, and I think we can, here in this conversation, which is very helpful, I think we can pull Mike in 2 directions. If y'all can help or pull him in terms of the, sales pitch, if you will, I'll be glad to pull him in terms of the practical, the reality. What are we doing with these trees? Because I think you need one to go with the other. Because if somebody came in and said, hey, how much do you need? Yes, you need to have that question. But what are you going to do with it? How are you even taking care of these trees? Does Mike even know what he's doing? Does he have a plan? That's where you need this type of document. Yes, this is how we're taking care of it. This is how we prioritize, and this is how we're handling it. So I can stay on that. I'll stay true to that nature of keeping it reality.
And just to be clear, so everybody remembers, since the commission might not recall what the document looked like last month, we did nothing in the editing to sort of call into question Mike's expertise about the plan and all that. We added in some language to strengthen it. And we did a little bit of editing, but I don't think there's anything in there that gave Mike any problems, and except for this section. And I think the answer really is just to say, we're just going to reorder this section so that we start with, it shows what can we do with additional funding. And if we don't get this funding, if we get a little less, this is what we can do. If we don't get any of this money, we're going to have to fall back on our budget. And that's going to get us nothing, or it's going to get us a lot less maintenance. So I think if we go back and just make a few tweaks between me and Mike and Peggy at this point, and then just resubmit it to the commission for a final look. I'm not hearing any objections to having a document like that. And we're going to be doing this again when we do CIP in a few months. We're going to be having this conversation.
Yeah.
If that's okay to everybody, then, because I know, Mike, you want this in place, and Todd, you want this in place, and you know, we want to sort of get this off our agenda too. And I think we're about 95% there. Anybody disagree? I don't see any disagreement. Mike, are you good?
Yeah, that's fine. I think Peggy, to your point also, this, I mean, this is just really a tool for us, you know, to help request funding, but this is not the CIP request. Like, it probably wouldn't be prudent to include those 3 different options in, like, and say the CIP request. We would ask for what we need, which we've spelled out here. So I think it's just kind of, it helps support our case. But again, if we needed something else for another tool or another document to take to planning commission or city council or something to help demonstrate the need, you know, we could do that.
But I think to Peggy's point, and I agree, while that's true, we don't want something on paper that in any way suggests that we can get by, right?
Okay.
So that's the only point about this, is that this should start with the strongest case for the money. And the realist will say, we can't give you 100,000 this year. And you know, then at least they know what they're getting for 50. And then if a branch falls on the wrong head, then maybe next year it's back up to 100. We don't know. But, we hope that doesn't.
Among our midst, Jody, he's listening, say, so we have to make a big case for the most money.
Yeah, Jody always takes care. He looks out for the trees when it's the right thing to do. So
I
right,
was
so
gonna
there's
say that at my last planning commission meeting, I reported on us, of course, and made a point about the emerald ash borer and the reckoning that is coming for dealing with the infected trees and the trees that are starting to need to be taken down, and how that was going to be expensive. And I was not surprised maybe, but Hosea Mitchell, the chair, said yes, the Parks and Rec, who he sits on their committee board, he said, yeah, Parks and Rec is really acutely aware of this, and it's been on their mind too. It's on their mind. So I think Mike certainly is in Parks and Rec, but I want to just be sure that there's not another effort going on or something else going on that's parallel with our effort.
Not that I'm aware of. Todd, Todd can speak to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, but I'm glad it sounds like everyone is aware of the major issue happening in our parks, which sounds like a good thing.
Yes, yeah. It at the least it shows that it is being talked about in a broader audience than the Tree Commission.
Yeah, it definitely is, and it is. I've discussed it with Chip many times already. One thing I can assure you, even though I say I care about the reality, don't have to worry about me on the ask part. I'll be the largest cheerleader for this, because I dealt with this in Fairfax to where, we were getting 200-some thousand a year. You'd think that would do it. No, we needed $1.2 million a year, and the closest we got up to was about 800,000. And it was from these same conversations we're having right now. What if you don't get it? What if you do? Well, you're going to have to get it, because it's going to get worse. It's going to get more dangerous or whatever. So I'm primed and ready to jump up on that soapbox at any point. And I've already started that. That's why you are hearing more stuff about it. Don't know if it will be successful, but yes, this is many people are going to have to ask over and over and over.
Great. Thank you, Todd.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. That's good to hear. To go back to the first subject matter this evening, I do think, and this is just me being a little bit, not paranoid, but a little sensitive. I do think if we go ahead with this WASP thing and we message it, let's be very clear. There's got to be something in that press release or any kind of messaging that this is by no means a substitute for anything we're talking about. Because people will just latch on to things. Oh, I hear that's the greatest thing in the world. Well, the WASPs are going to get rid of them. I know it sounds silly, but we have to make sure that we handle that messaging well, because we don't want to undermine this. That message could be coming out, within months of commission and council seeing this ask, and people grasp for hope. So whatever gets written, we need to make sure we're clear on that. before it goes out.
knowing that it's a 5-year study, clearly that's an initiative that's looking to the future
Yeah.
of new ash trees growing.
Correct.
Not the existing ones.
Correct. That's one good thing to hit. And also that it's sort of in the way of sort of a national program and a study. So there are words we can use to make sure that it's not seen as the solution. But anyway. Any other questions, or Mike, there's anything else you need from us on this? We're just going to do a little bit of revising and get it out to the commission. We want to get this, basically, we'll send this out, and if there are any further comments or objections, we'll just consider it that Mike can go forward with this plan. So.
Okay.
All right, you have something to tell us, some specific things about mall trees.
Okay, yeah, we'll start with the code building project. Some of you may recall that there was a large planter. It had previously had some azaleas, some Bradford pear in front of the old ice rink. And it came out to where they could stage equipment for the new code building. There was some conversation about what trees would be planted back there, and then Parks would then take over the area. That was kind of the last part of the code building project. There was some conversations about what kind of species, tree species, the tree commission would like to see back. I have asked for some diagrams or dimensions or something that I would be able to share with the commission to get some sort of, feedback as far as, how big, what soil volume are we working with, how much space do we have to work with. I've not heard back yet. I can see Brian Holiska is listening into the meeting. And if he has anything to add, because I know he worked extensively on this project, but I do not have anything to share as far as specifics for that. But when I do, I will share them with the commission. I'm looking for feedback as far as species we would like to see go back there.
So what's your sense of the time frame? I mean, is this something, I know that building, they're saying occupancy in the fall, so, and we're in June. I mean, how quickly are they looking to build this planter?
I'm not sure. I think Brian Holiska, feel free to raise your hand and correct me, but I think they can get a certificate, the COI for, I think they can get that prior to finishing the planter, is my understanding. So I'm not sure. Like I said, I was asked about feedback, and then I haven't heard anything since.
Okay, my concern would be that it just suddenly, something happens this summer that it happens in the summertime. Also, in terms of, I know the commission was approached before this had to be done. I'm assuming that the decision as to why you're speaking to us this evening about this, the decision about this rests in Parks and Rec's hands, and by extension, the commission. So this is not going to just happen as part of the development, and we're not going to have the opportunity to review it. Am I correct in all of that?
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Again, Parks, we have not had a chance to review what has been proposed. So
Okay.
hopefully we get to see it before the planter is built.
Because it's an issue that obviously we want to take up at a meeting. We talked earlier about things we can circulate to the commission, but this is a conversation we would want to have in a presentation and see the diagrams and actually discuss it as a group, having seen it. So it sounds like that's what's going to happen.
Yes.
So start thinking, folks, about, we'll know how big this box is and how much soil there is, what we can actually put in it, but start thinking about your visions for that section. If you want, walk by, there's a lot of mud there right now, but you can walk past it and see. What about the trees at
Brian,
Central? Yeah, go ahead, Jeff A.
Sorry, it'd be good to know too, solar aspect and, like shaded by the building. Is it got sunlight all day long? I assume it'll be irrigated, or Mike, is this going to be like Parks and Rec going by and watering periodically? Like they do the planters on the mall?
Correct. It was not irrigated previously. I'll have to check. I do not remember specifically on the plans whether it was irrigated or not.
It's probably a little too much in the weeds, but there are lots of things to consider.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, and I mean, No, these are all important things to consider. And I think also we're going to talk in a minute about a little bit more detail on the mall tree study, but that's a longer project. But I know that people are very sensitive, people who live and work and have businesses and who dine and who spend time in the mall. When it hit the press a few years ago that there was a mall tree study and there was a walk around, I got several emails from people. What are you doing to the mall trees? This is an opportunity to do something thoughtful. We're not going to have a chance really to be doing anything on the mall for a period of time. So that's why I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to weigh in and do the best we can, because it's just a way to just buy a little bit of cred for the city and for the tree commission. There was some concern. I heard from a couple of people, why did all that whole pod thing, planner have to come down for construction? People get very attached, not just us, not just people on the tree commission. So I want to be sensitive to this because it's our one opportunity as a group, perhaps for some years, to have some visual impact on the mall as opposed to talking about what's going to happen in the future on the mall. Now, that said, Mike probably has another opportunity for us at Central Place. So why don't you tell us what's going on there?
Okay, I'm going to share my screen for a second. Just show you some pictures. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So Central Place in front of the Landmark Hotel, which you're probably familiar with. It's a bit of a sore subject as well. So we have two dead Norway maples at Central Place. They're not high risk as far as to people or property because they're not very large, but they do detract from Central Place along with the Landmark Hotel. So in lieu of a plan, I think it would be best to remove them and tack weld a piece of cast iron over the tree grate for the time being until we can get a plan as to what can go back there and replacement strategies for the mall. Again, there's two of these trees like this. I have a picture of another one, but as you can see, they're very obviously dead.
You know why?
The Norway maples have never done well at Central Place. The red maples before then in this location did not do well. It's a very difficult place to grow maples. It's a difficult place to get trees. Generally, we're fortunate that blue oaks have done as well as they have. These Norway maples had sun scorched year after year. It's very hot. They have all the heat reflecting from the pavers and the building. It's a very difficult location, especially for Norway maples. Yeah, it's a tough spot to grow trees.
Great. So we know better how to pick the next tree. We have the parameters for how to better pick another tree.
Sure. Yeah, I think so. I think we could definitely pick another tree, but then we come into conflict with the Halpern design as well as the just maintain the design integrity. I think that's why Norway maples were picked instead of red maples that were there previously, which the original design called for. So how much can we vary from the design will be a question for the mall tree study.
Do you think the replacement trees and what to replace it with and would be part of the study, the mall study?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we need that question answered.
Good.
Yep. I'm just going to take a wild swing at this. It's definitely, Jody, going to be part of the plan. We'll talk about where that plan is right in a minute. But my swing at this is that we have, it sounds like 40 years of history, 50 years of history, almost 45 years of history where maples don't work there. So as between dead trees and being faithful 100% to the plan, I mean, at some point, I'm assuming it's always been maple. There were never willow oaks there like 25 years ago. So the plan called for something that's failed repeatedly. So I think that will have to certainly be noted. And in taking them down, I know there's a record, but in taking them down, being able to represent to whoever gets the RFP to do the study that those were maples, and we need to be able to document for them that maples fail.
Mhm.
And we have to also be honest, I mean, putting plates on there for the short term could be a number of years. So people just gonna have to, we're not gonna have this wall tree study done and trees being planted back in there next year, or perhaps even for a couple of years. So whatever the solution is for now needs to be something that is relatively longer term. Are there any other comments or questions from members of the commission? I don't think there's any objection to taking down dead trees. Dead trees always
I don't
make-
know, does it help our cause to leave them there?
Well, no,
Help
I think we can, I think,
Or trim them and make some sort of art installation.
I mean, if there were willow oaks, as we know, we already have failing willow oaks, I would sort of probably agree with you more, but I don't know. I can't tell, Judy, because you have such a poker face. So whether you actually thought it would make the case, I tend to think it doesn't make the case to leave them there, but I'm open to,
Okay, it just gets people's attention, that's for sure, and maybe they'll start asking, well, when are you gonna get this study done so we can replace them? Just a thought.
yeah, no, it's a thought.
We can
It
hang
also
something
makes-
art on them.
It also makes people sad to see dead trees. I don't know.
You could trim them and then paint them blue or green or something, and then put some signs on them that say, study underway.
We could hold our
Participate
stakeholder-
in your local government.
we could hold our stakeholder focus groups under them.
There you go.
On a hot day in August. I'm actually beginning to think Jody probably has an idea here.
It makes it look like nobody cares, makes it.
Yeah, no, I think,
Yeah.
I think fundamentally, but again, I do think that we need to make it clear throughout the entire process that trees have failed there, and we're end up with this empty, hot space.
Yeah, it's
which is
interesting
not
to
very
note
pleasant.
that they were maples, as Mike said, and then they replaced them. But there are maples on the side street going up toward Market, which maybe not doing great, but they get more shade. So they're doing better. Not that maples were the best choice for anywhere on the mall, but anyway. I
All
think.
right, well, Mike, it sounds like there's consensus to take a chainsaw to them and
Okay.
take them down. And do we have, I should know this, but do we have we had at times other places on the mall where there have been no trees? Is that in front of City Hall at one point and where the grates were just covered over? I mean, there's obviously a good solution that Public Works, Parks and Rec, and the city attorney is fine with about, because at least if you bump into a tree, that's one thing. But I mean, this is going to be a safe, because that's the central place. I guess the question is, it can be done so there's going to be no tripping, right?
Yeah, we can do it. We can tack, a small piece of cast iron to make it safe and ADA compliant.
Okay.
We can do that.
So it's flush.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, just had to ask. Since we said go ahead and cut them down, I wanted to make sure. All right, any other comments?
Yeah, sorry. I mean, is there any way that you could actually replace the tree with a tree from a nursery that, say, remains in a pot, where you actually just like have a tree or something green there? Can you cut the grate in half and have a tree waiting to be planted?
That's a maintenance.
I mean, it wouldn't be stable and it wouldn't really be good for the tree to be growing in a pot,
You'd have to water it every day. You'd have to be out there.
A lot of
Yeah.
maintenance.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Just thought I'd ask.
Yeah.
What about something green? I don't know.
okay, if there are no other comments or questions about that, we'll move on to the last item. So I'm gonna, since this was on my plate, Mike, I'll take a bit of the lead on this. So Mike did provide, as you know, the tree study RFP. I've had a chance to edit it some. I know that Jeff P. was going to look at it. I also, for some technical support that I didn't have, technical knowledge, I asked Paul Jose to look at it too, not so much for the narrative, but for some of the sort of the bullet points. But in doing, and it's not far enough along really. I mean, we could have put it in the packet, but it would have been just for you all to look at some red line strikeout, and that's just not a good use of our time. But a couple of issues, a couple of things have come up that I think are worth talking about. Peggy and I have talked about this and shared a little bit with Mike. And since we do have a little bit of time left in this segment, we should just talk about them as we go forward with this. There is, as you know, even though we cleaved the cultural, I believe it's a cultural landscape study. I've lost track of the terms. There originally for a while had been two studies sort of merged together with a single ask, and it took a while, but Mike, working with others in the city, sort of split them up because we weren't sure where the other study was going, number one, or where the whole thing was going in terms of coming up with first an RFP and then an actual tree study for the malt trees. And secondly, because from the beginning, we wanted to make sure that this proposal is focused. We know there's something bigger than just the trees in terms of mall infrastructure, but that the emphasis really is on, or at least a prime emphasis is on the fact that this is about what are we going to do about these trees? So there are a lot of questions that we're asking a vendor who bids and wins for the proposal. We're asking them to answer, but fundamentally, when I was looking at the narrative, sort of tweaking it back, because when Brian Daly had written it, it was really at the time that there was sort of just going to be a general sort of ask. I know Mike took first cut at it. I took a second cut at it. It still needs some work. So, but it does raise the issue, and Peggy did reach out since we have been in communication with Jeff Warner about this. It does raise the issue. She asked just about the status of that, and we don't have to get into a lot of detail about that, but it does raise the issue of we want to be really sure that we're writing not only a RFP and getting a study that is fundamentally about the trees and also their impact and the synergy between the trees and the hardscape, because there is language in there, which I think should remain in there, about the overall infrastructure. And I say, as the chair of the tree commission, and I'll speak for, well, I'll just speak for the commission if others want to object that, we don't want that infrastructure part to be the argument against the trees, but we understand that there's a synergy there. So that the report, the RFP and the study should reflect those two things. But there is a risk that if there's a separate study out there that's looking at the Halpern design, which cannot be considered separate, the trees are part of that design. I mean, Mike just pointed out, with the maples. You can't have a study, a cultural landscape study, which is going to be done by landscape architects and others, without talking about the trees. And I don't know how we deal with that issue to make sure that we're not sending conflicting messages to stakeholders, of which there are many, and they will be passionate about these trees. We all know that. And so it's going to be a hard enough sell when the time comes, once we have an RFP out and we have a study and we begin to reach out, and this is being facilitated in the community. I think it's something that we should at least just have on our minds to make sure that we don't end up with two reports that say different things about the trees, and or two reports that potentially have different impacts on the trees. And because I'm a lawyer and that's the way my mind works, sort of three squares down, and I know, Mike, you feel that we can avoid that, but I think we should be thinking about that. We should be writing the RFP, number one, to be as strong as possible for trees, but also sort of keeping our eye that we're not ending up with this potentially a mixed message or something that, once again, people can grab onto the thing that least affects their trees and leaves them standing until they fall on somebody. We need to really be conscious of that. And I think the commission generally needs to be conscious of that. And that's my piece on that, but I know Peggy feels that way too. So if Peggy wants to add anything. And then I'll open it up to comment and, questions about these two studies and how they work together.
We
Peggy.
go back a little bit. I guess we had thought the cultural landscape study had sort of gone away. But a friend of mine who Mark knows, Kate Slaughter, who's on the, a former mayor, who's on the Historic Resource Committee, emailed me and said, what is the Tree Commission doing about their study of the trees? Because the Historic Resource Commission is thinking about, or is doing, a grant from Virginia Department of Historic Resources on a cultural, historic, or landscape resource study. And I thought, so what's going on here? Here we go again. Here we go again. So then Kate asked, we sort of reached out to Jeff Warner, who's the historic resource person, I think, in NDS. And I'm still confused about what they're doing. So I know maybe something Mike and Todd need to find out, because it's kind of silly to have two studies going, two focus groups, you know, about them all.
Well, so I'm not sure. I have not touched base with Jeff Warner where he is in the process of the cultural landscape study. We went back and separated them because they are two separate studies with two very different needs. You know, the cultural landscape studies looking at the bricks and storefronts and, you know, the history of the mall and things like that, and these sort of details in the mall pots. And we're really interested in the trees and getting like a practical, looking at it, one or two practical replacement strategies. So they're going to have two very different outcomes. And I think I'm not concerned if they are in conflict of each other, because they're looking at two different things. They're looking at the mall, but they're looking at a different parts of the mall.
So,
The way it's written now.
so yeah, I have to say, having spent a lot of time going through that report, that RFP, if that's the case, then I'm going to take a stronger knife to it, and I'm going to excise anything that says infrastructure, because that's the confusion. Their
Yeah,
plan says they're going to look at the Halpern design. Our plan says we're going to look at the trees and the infrastructure within the context of the Halpern design.
yeah.
I'm perfectly happy to rewrite this mall tree study report to be absolutely about the trees with no bullet points that's talking about any of the other infrastructure. If that's what they're doing, then the concern goes away. But right now, there's enough overlap between the two that unless we are careful about how we write the RFPs, there is absolutely conflict. When both talk about Halpern and both talk about infrastructure, you can't help but have a conflict. So maybe it starts from my being wrong about the draft you presented us. If we can go in there and make it 100% about the trees, I mean, we'll reference the Halpern design, but if we're not, because there's a lot of language Brian put in there about how it's important when considering the trees that you have to consider the infrastructure and maintenance. And I'm just speculating. You need to get trucks on there and you need to get that. I'm not against that, but if somebody else is dealing with that and we're just focusing on the trees, and let's make our strongest pitch and focus on the trees and not talk about any of that infrastructure.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I took a lot of that infrastructure parts out of the RFP, but if we feel that more needs to come out, then that I don't have a problem with that. I just feel that there's some things that, you know, in terms of tree health and the bricks and things like that, they can't be ignored. And as far as like the functionality of tree health, maybe not the color of the bricks as much.
So that's fine. That's what I said. I mean, to the extent that that's all part of the design, and we also have to have concern, but I just want to make sure that this isn't about, because to be honest, the Tree Commission has heard a lot in the past about the overall mall infrastructure and about the pipes and about the bricks and about the grates and the potential for that to all be part of our report and or two reports. And suddenly we're verging towards an argument that's going against replacing the trees with what we all feel we need, would not be acceptable. So I'm not talking about the sort of the whole package of the Halpern design. I think that should be all treated like we're not arguing against that. I just want to make sure that these are seen as two separate studies that are not in any way speaking in large part to the same element of the mall. That's my point. I saw Mark's hand up first. Sorry, he put up the little flashing hand thing, sorry.
Well, I was going to propose, because I can see the same conflicts kind of arising through misunderstanding. They are connected ultimately when it comes to where you put the new trees or groupings of trees. And even though I've always seen the tree study as kind of nested within how do you preserve the Halpern design as something that needed to be done first to inform any kind of future planning. Maybe not everyone sees it that way. And I'd be really interested to hear if, and maybe it's Jody or Paul, somebody who knows Beth Meyer really well, because Beth probably represents that cultural landscape position in that part of the study so well, that maybe we could try to preempt whatever conflict or misunderstanding there might be by sort of trying to understand other perspectives on what the relationship between the two studies actually is in terms of, you know, what would physically be affected in the final plan, because ultimately there's a plan. There's like an actual bricks and mortar plan at the end of this.
So since Jody was a reference, Jody, comment?
Yeah, so Mark's correct that ideally the cultural landscape report would come first and the tree study would come afterwards and be informed by the cultural landscape report, or disciplined, driven by the cultural landscape report. The reason I think that I was for separating them is because I saw the funding for the cultural landscape report lagging behind, and it was going to need more than what was allocated, and it was holding up anything happening to the trees. So I still believe that if it's possible, the cultural landscape report should come first, and that the trees should be, as you say, nested within it. I don't mind the tree study going ahead. I just think there needs to be a reconciliation with the cultural landscape report before the final recommendations are made. I mean, especially if the recommendations have to do with changing the types of trees, recommending a different species of trees, recommending a different placement of the trees so that they're not competing with each other. Any kind of design decisions that improve the health of the trees that then fight against the Halpern design, that's where the two need to work together. And I, not only Beth Meyer, but I think Ginny Keller could help with this kind of background also. She's been a strong advocate for the cultural landscape report and it not being separated from the trees.
So I would just say I agree with that. I mean, I don't think there's a sense of the tree commission that we should just take them all and do anything with the trees that would affect. But I think it also goes the other way. I mean, the cultural, whichever comes first, I mean, if it's us, because it looks like we might actually get a study done first, I think also the cultural landscape, you know, ought to be informed by sort of the expertise of arborists and people who actually deal with trees. I mean, I think that's the conversation we had.
And I think the idea was that there's something that was being recommended to be done to the mole trees now to improve their health for the future. Yeah. And that was being held up because there was no study.
No study, yeah. Jeff A. has been patient.
I guess I have a contrary opinion about this. If I were the individual doing the cultural landscape report, I would want to have as much information as possible to make a recommendation ultimately at the end of that report. And that information would include an arborist review or multiple different reviews of the tree health and of ways in which that individual or group of individuals would recommend some revision or some change in order to make a more healthy urban forest along that corridor. So I think if I were like doing a cultural landscape report, I would actually want to have this study first that would make a recommendation, maybe put some constraints actually on that study so that they would have to reckon with that and say, oh, well, you know, this is actually what the science is saying. This is what would be better for those trees. How do we reconcile that information that we have with what we are saying is either a preservation standpoint or some other issue that has to do with infrastructure or has to do with pipes or has to do with storefronts or has to do with rental, all those sorts of things. I mean, all of that should be aggregated, right, together, and then you reckon with it in you know, a report. And so I would say, let's go for it. And that should be something that like puts a stake in the ground and says, you know, damn it, these trees are important. And in order to have a really good population of trees here, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And then they'll have to reckon with that and figure it out. I mean, I think that's a better scenario, actually.
So
It's actually
especially for new members, there is a study. There was a study done in 2015, pretty comprehensive. Doesn't mean we couldn't use a second study. I think to both your points, Jody and Jeff, I think because I haven't sensed on the commission's part all these years that we would entertain or support a notion that the trees come before everything else, therefore we propose doing something that rips up the Halpern design. I don't think there's any sense of doing that. In that case, I think that those doing the cultural study should feel perhaps even more comfortable with our recommendations, whatever those turn out to be, because I don't think they're going to be anything that's going to severely or adversely go against the plan, their plan. Two things. One, then our study should really be about the trees. And that RFP should be, we should be looking for tree people. And we should be removing as much that's not about the trees from that RFP. And there are a lot of bullets in there that are really not about the trees. That's number one. Number two, we need to be very vigilant about weighing in on the cultural landscape study, because that's going to be our opportunity somewhere in the future to continue to advocate for the trees during that process. Because we would be a stakeholder, just like any other city group. I mean, we're the tree commission. So I think that makes me feel more comfortable. I'm wondering other comments or how the rest of you feel about that.
I would just say, the reality is we have the money, you know, to go ahead. The NDS or the historic resource, they don't have any money. I mean, they're just asking, as far as I understand, to get a grant. And it's not going to be much, I don't think. So just let them be and let's move forward. I mean, you know, because they don't have the money yet. And we've been waiting for this for a long time.
Yeah. I don't think there's any disagreement about moving forward. I mean, I think everybody's resolved with the fact we do it. I think the question is, what are we asking for in the RFP?
Trees. It should be about trees.
And it started off as something very different. Mike modified it down. I've modified it more, but I feel like it could be modified even further to hone in on what the tree commission wants to come out of this study. And then
Can it be about trees and soil, Brian, or what do we say is it just the tree, or is it the tree and it's?
It would be the entire environment.
Okay.
And again, if whoever we hire ought to understand and appreciate, I'm not going to scrub Lawrence Halpern's name with the design from there. I mean, those trees exist within that context. So it ought to be a vendor that is not just about trees, but that understands landscape design and all that sort of stuff and can appreciate what's there. So just to be clear, it is about the trees, but it's not about the trees, and don't worry about anything else. I just don't want anybody in this study to be worrying about things like brick colors or where the pipes are, any of that stuff right now. That's something we know we're going to have input on from stakeholders, from Public Works, from Parks and Rec. We want to focus on what should we do long-term about these trees within the context of that design. And if I'm misspeaking for anybody, I know we're getting the 7 o'clock hour, but this conversation is going to drive the next set of edits on this RFP.
I agree mostly with you. I could not support if the tree study made design recommendations that changed Halpern's design unless that was approved by the Cultural Landscape Report and those consultants.
I agree. I'm with you on that. I mean, I don't know how others feel, but I'm absolutely with you on that. I think that's critical.
I wanted to clarify, is in either of the study, is the end result a design? Like, is part of the RFP a proposed design reconfiguration of the mall
No,
of some sort? Because it's kind of, it's potentially inherent at a detailed level, you know, in both of these studies. If the trees aren't working right now, if we're proposing another species, a different grouping, a different spacing, to be technical about it, then that's a design solution. I worry that there's sort of these reports that end up in a drawer. You know, there has to be action at the end of it. And I'm just wondering in the RFP or two RFPs or combined RFP, you know, is the end result a design proposal? Because that's the way it gets resolved. It doesn't get resolved by having policy at the end of the report.
I totally agree with Mark. I mean, I think if they say, like, if the arborist says there's not enough soil for these trees, or there's a conflict here with the pipes, or there's an issue with the way in which this was detailed in the first place, that's a really good thing to know, because then it's actionable. You can say, well, let's make that change, and hopefully it stays consistent with the Halpern plan. I mean, I'm all for staying consistent with the Halpern plan, but if you also want healthy trees, it's good to know what those constraints are and to say, well, we need more soil volume. How are we going to do that with the way the foundations of the buildings are, or the way the pipes run, or et cetera? So I think really you couldn't say to an arborist, like, tell me how this works, but don't tell me how it's in conflict with the plan, the Halpern plan. I mean, you want somebody to go in there and give you the honest truth about, like, this isn't working because of A, B, and C. And if it's in conflict with the Halpern plan, that's really good to know, because then you can evaluate it and you can say, okay, we're going to replace these trees in another 60 years, because that's just the way it's going to be.
remember, these trees have been there for 45 years. For those trees to do as well as they're doing, there's not a lot of problems. I mean, there are problems with those trees, but they're doing amazingly well for considering the condition that they're planted in and where they're planted. Just to remember,
Yeah.
you know, the willow oaks have done
So
really well.
for the first time, we've gone past our 7 o'clock hour, although this is a very good and a very needed discussion. I mean, we've been kicking this around
Yeah.
forever. Peggy thought when we started as chair and vice chair that we'd be planting new trees right now, and I was like, no. But I think then we do need to really revisit this RFP even more, and just all these comments. And there are some of you who have expertise, obviously, that I don't. So what I'm going to propose is I'm going to get it as far along. I know that Jeff was going to look at it, Jeff P. To where I think that it represents at a high level, and then it's going to have to be a sort of a group edit. I'm gonna send it around. I'll ask Jeff A to look at. Everybody will look at it, because I think these are all valid points, and I think we've waited this long. I hate to say this, but we have to send out the right RFP, and we have to know what we're getting. And it has to be something that we can support and stand by, and that informs others. So I think we're a little bit farther behind now on this than I thought. So we have 6 weeks to the next meeting. So hopefully we can continue to make hay on this, since we have a lot of other things to do. But I do thank you for all your comments. I mean, this is very helpful. At this point, we should still ask if there are any public comments. I know we're past the hour by 3 minutes, but is there anybody in the public that was listening in and would like to make a comment?
There's one, Joan Fenton.
Are you managing, or is communications managing?
I can bring her in.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Hi, Joan. Can you hear us? Can you hear me? We can.
Yes.
Okay. This is Joan Fenton. I have stores on the downtown mall, was chair of the Downtown Business Association for 20 years. I would hate to see you remove those trees and not put something there. Ludwig Kudner maintains the flowers along the side street and comes out and waters them every day. If there was a planters with some trees in them or something, preferably that you could not sit on, but that simply had some greenery or something there, I think it's a mistake to have two holes in the ground with nothing there. It's not going to make it look a whole lot better. It's just you're not going to have the dead trees. So my request would be that any plans to remove those include a replacement at the same time. And
Okay.
temporary, it does not need BAR approval, so it could just be done. My second point, which may be beyond what you're willing to tackle, is the city is not allowing or is not going to put a Christmas tree at Central Place because they want to do it down at City Hall for the second year. There is a hole in the ground that where the tree is usually put, and in doing your designs, or even sooner, is there a possibility that a permanent tree could be planted where that spot is, where the Christmas tree has traditionally gone by the Paramount? And we had kind of hoped that perhaps there could be, I don't know if it would survive and if it's the right place, but to have a spruce or some other tree that could grow and be part of a holiday decoration and just be a permanent growth on the tree, I mean, on the mall. And to at least think about that, we're going to ask the city to let us do it. It would be great if you all thought of what could go there and if that's a possibility. And those are my two comments.
Okay, thank you, Joan, for your comments and your ideas. Mike, there are things there that are parks more than us, or what are your?
So we would not be able to plant at the Paramount at the manhole where we put the holiday tree. It's only a manhole. It's big enough to hold it's big enough to fit a tree trunk in. It has no soil space. It has no soil. It's just concrete. So that would not be suitable. As far as putting something temporary, we could certainly explore options, but I would put it back to the tree commission. If they felt that was something that was suitable, I'd put that back to their consideration as well.
Can I ask a question about where the Christmas tree is, since it's something I hadn't thought about? When there's no tree there, it's not a hazard.
No, it's a manhole cover.
There's a cover, but I mean, it's covered right now.
Correct.
Okay, but there's no soil volume at all.
No, there's no soil in there at all. It's just concrete, and it's big enough for the bottom part of the Christmas tree.
Okay. So I think that one resolved. As for the other trees, I mean, there was some interest on the commission to making sure it wasn't a plain dark space. I mean, I don't know if who we would ask necessarily. I mean, this is a parks question too. I mean, you have the planters, but those big round planters. I mean, what would you do? And it adds to maintenance, and I mean, we can express an opinion, but there's also a maintenance issue. So it's really a joint conversation here.
Sure. Well, I can certainly explore options and see what we are able to do. I don't know if we can. I'd have to look at the tree grates that are existing and see if they would be able to support a planter or something else, or if we have them available. Then it's a matter of finding staff time to move them and things, and having trees or something else on hand. It's not something we have right now. We plant in the fall, so I don't think we would be able to put a tree back.
So for now, could you explore that option of, since I don't think anybody on the commission would oppose if there were some kind of planter and greenery there, so it's not just empty space. It doesn't have to be. I mean, I'm not talking about the largest planters that we have if the grate's not going to hold that. But it seems to me it ought to have enough soil volume that it doesn't need to be watered twice a day. But then I leave that to Parks and Rec's expertise. Sure. Is the commission fine with Mike reviewing that? I don't think there's any objection to that. Okay. So thank you for public comments. Are there any other public comments?
No.
Okay. Any other items or announcements that are not on the agenda? Anything that we did not cover? Peggy and I will work right away tomorrow on action items because a number of you are on the line with us for some action items. We will go forward with planning for a July 13th meeting, understanding that we would not have Jody there, but if we can muster a quorum otherwise, we will meet on the 13th of July. Mike, we're going to need to make sure that that is communicated in proper channel to, since it's not our normal meeting date. So that we get on the agenda and where communications can cover. Is there anything left? We finished 10 minutes early last time and we're going to finish 10 minutes late tonight. We apologize to those of you who've had to stay on. Any final comments? I don't see anything. All right, I thank you all for all your wonderful work and suggestions. Have a great June. Happy summer. It's early, but have a nice summer. Thank you.
Night.
Good night, everybody.
Night.